Hello and welcome to Unacademy IAS English, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the daily Hindu news analysis. So let's begin today's discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the daily edition of the Hindu, I have chosen around 9 very important articles. These topics are relevant both for prelims and mains. So let's analyze them comprehensively so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. And if you guys are benefiting from this initiative, do extend your support with more likes and comments. Do share these videos with fellow aspirants as well. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Before we start the discussion, I have a couple of important announcements. One, to help the 2025 aspirants who are preparing for the upcoming prelims, we have launched a comprehensive program known as Conquer Prelims 2025. It's an absolutely free initiative right here on our YouTube channel. So right now we have started the second stage of this program from 10th February to 24th Feb, where every day at 7 p.m. we shall be uploading these videos covering the most important static topics, which will be high yielding topics for your upcoming exam. So do make a note of the schedule which has been shared here in the PPT. Later, when you download the PPT as well, you can take a look at this detailed timetable and accordingly attend all these classes without fail. Then, for 2026 aspirants, Unacademy is offering a special discount on our IAS courses. You stand to get 50% flat discount along with a 6-month free extension on our IAS courses. This will give you access to all the live classes, the test series, study material, and as well as one-on-one mentorship and doubt resolution sessions. If you subscribe for the iconic program, you will even get access to the printed economy notes made by Mrunal Patel sir. So to avail this offer, all you have to do is enter this code IAS English when you're subscribing to the program. So those interested, the link can be found in the video description, and ensure that you enter the code to avail this special offer. The offer is going to end tomorrow. Then after the session ends, I'll be sharing the PDF of this class on my Telegram channel. So you can scan the QR code, join my Telegram channel so that you can access the PDF. Do join our official Telegram channel as well of Unacademy IAS English. And the link for that is provided in the video description, because after the session, we are conducting a daily quiz on these topics so that you can easily revise these articles. With this, let's get started with today's analysis by looking at the first column from page number 6. This article is focused on climate finance, and it talks about how India can play the role of a leader to promote South-South climate cooperation. See, just yesterday, coincidentally, we spoke about India leading the global South and promoting South-South cooperation in international relations. Today, we have an article related to the topic of South-South cooperation, but it is specific to the climate domain. The article is focused on how India can leverage climate finance arrangements that were mobilized at COP29 in Baku in Azerbaijan that was held last year. In fact, COP29, the Conference of Parties number 29 to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, is also referred to as the Climate Finance COP. Because at the Baku Climate Summit, there was a very big development which has introduced few finance arrangements to mobilize the required funds and technology to assist developing countries so that they can make a transition towards cleaner economy to help reduce global emissions. This accounts for differentiated responsibilities between the developed countries and developing countries. Finance arrangements have been provided for under COP29, specifically under Article 6, which we are going to focus upon today. Now, before we discuss this in detail, you need to note that India has always been a leader in the climate negotiation platform at UNFCCC. At every COP summit, India has given a voice to the global South. India has not only prioritized its own interests, but we have also given priority for the interests of other developing and underdeveloped countries. India has always championed the voice of these countries to hold the developed countries accountable for their historical emissions. Because don't forget, developed industrialized nations, they basically got a free pass for almost 150 to 200 years to freely burn fossil fuels without any restrictions, which is what enabled them to get developed in the first place. But developing and poor countries, they never got this carbon space in the carbon budget. Today, some of the developing nations might be the largest emitters. Like India, for example, is the third largest emitter after China and United States. But still, our per capita emissions are extremely low. And we still have a lot to do with regard to our socio-economic development. And this would require a certain amount of carbon space to burn few more fossil fuels in the coming decades, so we can also achieve the developmental goals without compromising our environmental commitments. It was India which championed this whole idea of CBDR, common but differentiated responsibilities. Since 1990s, we have championed the CBDR idea at climate change negotiations, which was even incorporated into the Kyoto Protocol of 1997. This has been the core doctrine that India and other developing countries have pushed in order to hold these developed industrialized nations accountable for their historical responsibilities. Essentially, it means that the goal to fight climate change is a common goal for every country, because eventually climate change is going to affect every one of us. But the responsibilities that we take up to fight climate change should be differentiated based on our historical emissions, which means developed industrialized countries will contribute more. They will have to put in more efforts, spend more money as well to transition to cleaner fuels and move away from fossil fuels. It also means that they have to assist developing and poor countries by sharing finance and technology with them, by providing the required funds and the clean technology, so that even the global south countries can make a transition and reduce their emissions. So though the goal of fighting climate change is a common goal for every country, the responsibilities have to be differentiated. This is the mantra that India and many other developing nations, they championed at the Climate Change Convention. And you see this to be the basic principle on which climate talks have been held. Even though the Paris Agreement does not include CBDR principle explicitly, you can still see the distinction between developed countries and developing countries when it comes to climate change talks. So at COP29, Article 6 of Paris Agreement was operationalized. See, the Paris Agreement of 2015 is the current climate agreement that we have, which replaced the Kyoto Protocol, and it sets a very ambitious target to keep the global rise in temperatures to under 2 degrees Celsius by the end of the century, and if possible, to limit the global rise in temperatures to under 1.5 degrees Celsius in order to prevent irreversible climate change. So to achieve this ambitious goal, under Paris Agreement, countries are required to come out with their voluntary contributions. In Kyoto Protocol in 1997, legally binding commitments were placed on developed countries and industrialized nations to reduce their emissions. But in Paris Agreement, a slightly different approach has been taken, where countries are encouraged to come out with voluntary contributions known as NDCs or INDCs, intended nationally determined contributions, which means each country, depending on their historical responsibilities and their current capacities, they will decide upon their voluntary contribution to tackle climate change. Now, India, for example, has come out with a list of NDCs, very ambitious goals, as part of nationally determined contributions under Paris Agreement. One of India's goal is to reduce our emissions intensity by 45% in the coming decade, to reduce our carbon emissions intensity by 45%. Another important voluntary contribution of India is to ensure that we have 500 gigawatts of installed renewable energy capacity by 2030. Plus, there are voluntary contributions with regard to afforestation to increase the carbon sink that is available. So India is proactively focusing on not just reducing emissions by moving away from fossil fuels and adopting clean energy, clean renewable energy, such as solar, wind, nuclear, etc. We are also trying to focus on carbon sequestration. We are also trying to prioritize carbon storage, carbon removal from the atmosphere, along with our focus on shifting away from fossil fuels and adopting cleaner, renewable forms of energy. Now, in this entire transition that India is seeking to make, it will require a lot of investments to be made, because clean technology, renewable energy is not easy, it's not cheap. It is very, very expensive to make this transition. To even set up carbon storage facilities, to focus on carbon sequestration projects, to create carbon sinks and remove the excess carbon from the atmosphere, it will require enormous investments and latest technology as well. Now, this is where developing nations like India and other underdeveloped countries and poor countries, they depend heavily on developed nations to provide the assistance to them. We expect developed nations to provide finance and technology to share these resources with developing nations, underdeveloped countries such as India and other global south countries, so they can make this transition to achieve their nationally determined contributions. So as part of this arrangement, under Paris Agreement, we have Article 6, specifically Article 6.2. This provision of Paris Agreement provides for something known as ITMO, Internationally Transferred Mitigation Outcomes. I'll repeat this. Under Article 6.2 of Paris Agreement, there is a feature known as ITMOs, Internationally Transferred Mitigation Outcomes. This provides for a climate finance mechanism which has now been activated through COP29 summit at Baku in Azerbaijan. That is why the Baku Climate Summit is being referred to as the Climate Finance COP, as this conference of parties held last year provided for the operationalization of climate finance, which is envisioned under the Paris Agreement through the provisions of Article 6.2. So this is exactly what we need to understand. What is this ITMO? How does it work? How does it provide for climate finance? How does it provide for transfer of funds and technology from developed countries towards developing nations? This is what we need to learn. See, ITMO essentially provides for market-based carbon trading mechanism. You might have heard about the concept of carbon credits, which has been pioneered since 1990s through the Climate Change Convention, which was actually included under the Kyoto Protocol as well. So those countries or those entities as well, organizations, companies, which execute projects where they are reducing their emissions by adopting new technology and cleaner technology, they stand to earn carbon credits, which are verified reduction of emissions. Now, those who hold these carbon credits can trade these carbon certificates in the carbon markets, so that those who are exceeding their limits, those who have an obligation to reduce emissions, and if they are not able to meet their emission targets, they can pay a penalty. They can essentially be disincentivized so that they can buy these carbon credits from those who are reducing emissions. Now, just to understand this better, let's take a hypothetical example. Let's say there is a thermal power plant coming up in India. This organization or this entity which is building the thermal plant will adopt cleaner technologies, better fuel and better processes to reduce the overall emissions. So according to the reduction in emissions, carbon certificate is awarded to that entity. It earns carbon credits which can now be traded in the carbon markets. Now let's say Japan is not meeting its climate targets. Japan is a developed industrialized country. It has historical responsibilities. Let's say Japan is not able to meet its emission reduction goals. So now Japan can pay the price, essentially like a penalty, by purchasing carbon credits from this Indian company. So this incentivizes the companies and countries which are looking to focus on cleaner technology, and it also creates a penalty system for those who are breaching their emission targets. So this essentially is the carbon market mechanism which has been pioneered since the last 3 decades under the Climate Change Convention. Now, under ITMO, there is a provision provided for the trading of these carbon credits. There will be a partner country and a host country under the ITMO mechanism. A partner country essentially refers to a developed country which is responsible for historical emissions, which is supposed to pay for the historical responsibilities and provide finance and technology to other developing and poor countries. The host country in this context, as per Article 6.2 of Paris Agreement, refers to the developing nations and underdeveloped countries where such climate friendly projects are being taken up. So this creates a positive incentive structure to reinforce the idea of low carbon development in developing countries and encourages them to focus on clean technologies, renewable energy to bring down their overall emissions. So developed countries, which are the partner countries, can purchase those carbon credits, which is now officially referred to as ITMOs, internationally transferred mitigation outcomes. Because this is a type of mitigation where you're trying to reduce carbon emissions and you're trying to reduce the impact of climate change. And these mitigation outcomes can be transferred internationally. It can be traded through carbon markets, just like you trade in stocks in the stock market. Similarly, by using carbon credits, you can trade them where the host country, which has reduced emissions by focusing on clean technology, renewable energy, can trade those carbon credits, those mitigation outcomes, by selling it to a partner country, which is a developed country, which might have breached its emission obligations. So these partner countries can also provide for transfer of not just finance, but even technology to the host country. So countries like South Korea, European countries, Japan, which have a commitment to tackle climate change and bring down their emissions, they can assist developing nations by providing finance, by purchasing these carbon credits, by transferring technology, sharing their expertise through the ITMO mechanism. Now, India has already taken a major step to activate the carbon markets in our country. A couple of years ago, in 2023, we started rolling out an emission trading scheme within our country. A carbon credit trading scheme is being operationalized by the government of India to encourage our companies, organizations, and entities to focus on clean development. In fact, under Kyoto Protocol, there was a clean development mechanism, CDM, where countries that focus on clean projects, renewable energy projects, if they reduce their emissions, they would be awarded these carbon credits, these certified carbon credits, which they could sell in the carbon markets and thus acquire finance and technology from other countries. So India is operationalizing this arrangement through the provisions of Article 6.2 under Paris Agreement, and the ITMO mechanism creates an opportunity for countries like India to receive finance and technology from the developed industrialized countries. But however, India is still not very optimistic about this arrangement because developed countries have not really matched up to their commitments. India expects developed nations to mobilize at least $1 trillion almost every year to enable climate finance. But currently we are nowhere near this target, as developed countries are barely mobilizing few $1 billion every year, whereas the requirement is up to $1 trillion per year. So India has kept on pushing developed nations for providing more finance and technology, and now we are going to leverage the ITMO mechanism to facilitate carbon trading and to ensure that we not only focus on a low carbon path, but we can incentivize our companies, our organizations, while bringing finance and technology from the partner countries, the developed industrialized nations. Now, this is where the writer feels that India has an opportunity to give leadership to the global south. For example, in Africa, where countries are struggling with development, most countries are underdeveloped and poor countries, India can provide the much needed leadership. India can voluntarily become the partner country to work with the host countries in Africa under the ITMO mechanism. And even we can provide finance and technology to African countries. Or India can work with other developed nations and mobilize finance and technology from them, which can be then channeled towards underdeveloped and poor countries, especially in Africa. So this is where the writer feels that India has a great opportunity. If it takes a leadership position, it can not only bring in more finance and technology from developed countries for itself, but it can also provide finance and technology to other poor countries, underdeveloped countries, especially in Africa, and thus emerge as a leader of the global south by promoting South-South cooperation. This is the essence of this article. But however, there are many challenges, many shortcomings to this mechanism. Because if you understood the ITMO mechanism and the whole carbon trading mechanism, essentially it will not result in a net reduction of emissions. It will still allow developed industrialized countries, the polluters, the big polluters, to continue their emissions, to continue on their current path, while they will simply purchase carbon credits in some other country, right? So this essentially may not really offset the overall emissions. It may not put us towards the path which we need to take to achieve the ambitious target to keep the global rising temperatures to under 2 degrees Celsius by the end of the century. In a way, it might create an opportunity for large companies and polluting industries and developed industrialized economies and even large developing economies like India, China, to keep on polluting, to keep on contributing to emissions just by paying the penalty, just by purchasing carbon credits from others. So this need not be a foolproof mechanism to bring down emissions overall, but it definitely creates a pathway through which developing underdeveloped countries can get support, finance and technology from developed countries. So India, if it can leverage its expertise and work with the other underdeveloped nations, we can actually position ourselves as a leader of climate action and mobilize more support for developing underdeveloped countries while holding the developed nations accountable for their historical responsibilities. That is what we take away from here. And the writer raises one more concern as well. With any such trading arrangement, there is always a question about transparency. Because some countries and few organizations, they might find shortcuts. They might find corrupt ways to earn carbon credits and try to sell them. So if this mechanism is not maintained transparently, if there is no fairness in this system, this could simply end up creating a corrupt system where few organizations and countries can keep on polluting and mask their, essentially their profile, their carbon profile, by showing that carbon credits are being purchased and finance and technology is being provided, while not genuinely providing any kind of finance to the developing nations. It might create a loophole of sorts which can be exploited, because if you don't have a clear verification regime regarding these carbon credits and certificates, and if there is no transparency maintained in these carbon markets where ITMOs can be traded internationally, right, this can just create a loophole in the system itself which can be exploited by polluting industries and by certain corrupt entities. So that is also a big shortcoming which has not been addressed by the Paris Agreement. So based on this, you can expect a mains question. So please take down this question, try to write an answer for this, and please post your answers in the comments so it can help other students as well. Now let's look at another interesting column on page number 7 related to forest fires and wildfires. Recently, Los Angeles in the United States was a victim of a deadly wildfire. See, LA, which is one of the richest regions in the United States, home to Hollywood celebrities, the entire stretch from Malibu all the way till San Diego is one of the most well-developed regions in the world, home to some of the ultra-rich, and the kind of properties present here, the townships that are present here, happens to be home to some of the richest elites. And for such a region to suffer this mega disaster which hit Los Angeles and California recently, it's nothing short of a tragedy. The writer believes that these deadly wildfires, forest fires, if not preventable, they can definitely be mitigated and reduced. Now see, Los Angeles and California, it's not new to wildfires and forest fires. It's very prone to forest fires, especially during the dry months. And it's not just Los Angeles. We have seen many such incidents happening in recent times. Just a couple of years ago in Hawaii, again in the United States, the entire tourist island of Maui was one entire town was wiped out by a deadly forest fire. Few years ago, you might remember the deadly forest fires in Australia, in South America, in Brazil, where most of the Amazonian forest was wiped out because of deadly forest fires. In the Mediterranean, in Europe, from Italy to Greece to Spain, deadly forest fires have had a huge impact. People lose their lives, they lose their property, their homes, infrastructure gets destroyed. More importantly, environmental and social damage is also reported. Now, the concern the writer is expressing is about the rising incidents of deadly forest fires and wildfires, which are becoming almost impossible to manage and contain. So definitely, climate change, global warming is playing a role, without a doubt. As the world continues to warm, we are going to witness more frequent, more intense extreme weather events. Forest fires are a result, it's a direct byproduct of such extreme weather. Higher temperatures, prolonged dry seasons, without a wet spell, without sufficient rains, makes the ecosystem vulnerable and prone to catch fire. But studies have established that other than global warming, most of the factors which are responsible for forest fires are man-made factors. In fact, in many cases, it has been noticed by experts that forest and wildfires are triggered by anthropogenic causes, human-induced causes through man-made activities. If you look at the LA wildfire as well, initial evidence has pointed towards a possible spark triggered by a power transmission line which set off the deadly fire in Los Angeles. So while we focus on climate change and its long-term consequences and other natural causes as well which can cause such forest fires, I think we should pay more attention to the man-made causes, because around the world there are numerous incidents, examples to prove that anthropogenic causes, man-made factors are more responsible for deadly forest fires. Even in Brazil, for example, the wildfires in the Amazon was linked with anthropogenic activities, the large-scale deforestation, mining activities, which was promoted by the previous Brazilian government. In Australia as well, fire incidents were linked with anthropogenic causes. For example, there might be a local fire which has started due to natural causes, but if it is not managed, prevented and contained, obviously the wildfire is going to spread. Or let's say there is a carelessly lit fire, maybe a campfire in a forest camp, or a fire which has been put for cooking purposes by a local community or by visiting tourists, or even a carelessly disposed cigarette butt which has not been stamped. So even such causes can easily trigger these deadly wildfires. Upon that, you have practices such as slash and burn cultivation, what we call as jhum cultivation, where farmers, especially indigenous communities, they are known to set fire to farmlands in forested areas to clear the farm patch and prepare for the next cropping cycle. So all these anthropogenic causes, right, contributes directly to increased incidents of forest fires. Even hunters and poachers, they are known to camp in forested areas when they are trying to hunt wild animals, which is an environmental threat. They might set fires to scare away the animals and to trap the animals, and this fire might become uncontrollable, which might spread into a large wildfire. So most cases, anthropogenic man-made causes are largely responsible, along with the natural causes that are present. That is why it's very important to study the phenomena, understand the root causes, and plan preventive measures. If not prevent, at least mitigate these forest fires. Now, if you look at India, according to the Forest Survey of India, which brings out your India State of Forest report, 36% of our forests are vulnerable to wildfires. See, such data can be very useful, very, very important for your prelims as well as for your mains answers. In mains answers especially, you can't simply write generic statements. Along with your arguments, your views and opinions, you need to bring in substantiating arguments to back up your answer. So please note, according to India State of Forest report brought out by Forest Survey of India, 36% of our forest is highly prone to wildfires. For example, even in the Himalayan belt, states such as Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, they regularly witness forest fires at the foothills of Himalayas. You may not expect such wildfires in the Himalayan ranges. You might expect colder temperatures, but trust me, during the summer months, wildfires are seen even in Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, even in some parts of Jammu and Kashmir as well. Then Northeast India has to be the most prone for wildfires. Across northeastern forests, from Assam to Tripura, Mizoram and Arunachal Pradesh, the entire belt is highly prone to deadly forest fires. Then central, eastern and southern India as well is highly prone to deadly forest fires, be it the Dandakaranya region of Chhattisgarh, Odisha belt, or even Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, then Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, parts of Kerala, Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. All these states are highly prone. In Western Ghats, for example, in the Sahyadri ranges of Maharashtra, Goa, extending towards Karnataka, in the Nilgiri ranges present at the tri-junction of Karnataka, Tamil Nadu and Kerala, in the eastern Ghats of Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, extending to Odisha, Chhattisgarh. Lot of wildfires are reported every year and India is a big victim. In fact, according to a study, in the last 2 decades, forest fires have increased by 10 times in our country. A recent study has established that in last 2 decades, forest fire incidents have gone up 10 times, whereas our forest cover has barely increased by 1.12%. So what does this tell you? This tells you that more and more forest area is becoming prone and vulnerable and getting destroyed because of forest fires. The increase in forest cover is hardly 1.12%, but increase in forest fire incidents is 10 times in the last 20 years. So these wildfires have a deadly impact. If you look at the consequences, several lives are lost. Even in Los Angeles, few people were killed. Property and infrastructure can get completely destroyed. It could be private property, houses, as you saw in Los Angeles, where multi-million-dollar homes got burnt, or agricultural fields which could get burnt down, or public infrastructure which could get completely wiped out and damaged. Power infrastructure, telecommunication, internet infrastructure, they're highly vulnerable, right? These transmission lines will easily melt down and it can result in large-scale damage to public infrastructure as well, which has a huge economic impact. Then don't forget the ecological impact of forest fires. Forest fires have a deadly ecological impact. Studies have established that in India, every year 69 million tons of carbon dioxide is being emitted because of wildfires. It's contributing to greenhouse gas emissions, air pollution. Forest fires release deadly particulate matter into the atmosphere, which is a deadly air pollutant responsible for several respiratory diseases. It is shortening our lifespans and contributing to more emissions, leading to global warming in turn, which creates this vicious, never-ending cycle. Studies have established that in India, economic losses because of wildfires is pegged at 1.74 lakh crore rupees. The economic loss is estimated every year at 1.74 lakh crores, which is massive. This affects local communities, especially those indigenous communities and forest dwelling tribes that depend on the forests. Those locals who depend on forests for basic agriculture, for collecting forest produce, for their sustenance and livelihood. Their entire livelihood could be uprooted because of these deadly wildfires. This will leave behind a huge socio-economic impact. And don't forget the damage caused to biodiversity. It results in large-scale deforestation. It can threaten various animals, birds, and other species of flora and fauna, which are already vulnerable, pushing them towards extinction. For example, in the deadly wildfires in Australia, in the Australian outback, and in the Amazon in Brazil, several lakhs of flora and fauna species were affected, resulting in significant loss of biodiversity. It might take decades, maybe even centuries, for nature to replenish the lost biodiversity. So this is the big price that we stand to pay when you don't contain and manage these forest fires. So let's understand what exactly is India doing to contain and prevent such forest fires. Do we have a plan in place? The National Disaster Management Authority recognizes forest fires as a disaster, right? It can be both a natural or a man-made disaster. It has a set of guidelines in place as per the disaster management plan and policy that has been adopted by the National Disaster Management Authority. Forest fires receive a high priority in disaster management. India has a national action plan for forest fires. At the national level, there is an action plan for forest fires. There is a centrally sponsored scheme as well, the Forest Fire Prevention and Management Scheme, where the center provides funds to the states and works with states to provide them the required support and resources needed to contain and manage these forest fires. But however, according to the writer, the allocations being made by the center is not sufficient. If you look at the budgetary allocation for this centrally sponsored scheme, in the last 5 years, government has been allocating hardly 35 to 50 crore rupees, which is nowhere sufficient to provide the required resources to the state governments to fight forest fires. So there is a need to step up the financial allocation and pay more attention to forest fires and give more support to the states. There is a need to bring in more technology. Today, technology can play a very big role in early warning and forecasting, which is a very essential aspect of disaster management. Satellites, drones that are equipped with infrared thermal scanners can not only detect the start of an early fire and give out real-time alerts, they can also help in tracking the spread of a wildfire and in planning strategies to contain them. So satellites of ISRO and other global space agencies are deployed for this purpose, to identify the forest fire prone zones and to track forest fires in real time and generate early warning forecasting alerts, so the authorities can be put on alert. Drones can be deployed specifically in the most prone areas to look out for any active fires and immediately mobilize the counter response to diffuse them at the local level itself. So such technologies will play a critical role and India is trying to employ them. Institutions like IMD, ISRO will play a critical role as well in working with the disaster management authorities and the state forest departments. India Meteorological Department, responsible for tracking temperatures, for giving out high temperature alerts, heat wave alerts, can give prior warning which indicates the beginning of the forest fire season. ISRO, with its satellite resources, can provide critical forecasting alerts. So that is something that India should further scale and deploy at a larger level. Other than that, involvement of local community is very, very critical. The state government, the forest officials, the forest department in particular, will have to proactively work with the local community to manage, contain and prevent forest fires. For example, a few states have done pretty well. States like Uttarakhand, even Odisha, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, to an extent, Maharashtra as well. They have very good community engagement program where they promote awareness amongst the local communities and get the local communities involved in looking out for these initial fires which might start and taking countermeasures immediately to contain them at the local level. We can even draw lessons from other global models, successful models that we have seen in Nepal, in Indonesia, where these countries have developed forest fire free villages by roping in the local community and villages, by training them, spreading awareness to them, and by mobilizing their effort and resources to combat these forest fires. Nepal and Indonesia have set an example. So maybe we need to look at their experiences as well, try to inculcate that. If you look at the Nilgiri belt, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Kerala have done pretty well to involve the local communities in the protected areas and work with them to take precautionary measures. In fact, even before the fire season starts, there are few basic steps which are undertaken, like clearing all the dry material. The dry organic material can be cleared and removed off, at least in the most prone zones. You might have seen forest department officials with local community members and volunteers setting deliberate fire. A deliberate fire is set, controlled fire is created to burn off the dry organic material before the fire season begins. Then forest lines can be drawn. Forest fire lines are created in order to create a gap so that the fire doesn't spread from one pocket of the forest to the another pocket of the forest. Trenches are dug, sometimes filled with water as well, or the vegetation is cleared in a patch of land so that forest fire in one region will not immediately spread to the other part of the forest. Usually forest fires spread because of the wind currents which can carry those embers, the hot embers, which will fly around over long distances, triggering fires in faraway regions as well. That's what happened in Hawaii, in Los Angeles. The strong wind currents were primarily responsible for fanning the wildfires and the embers. So drawing those forest fire lines, burning of organic material, the dry material that is present through controlled fires, these are basic steps that can be undertaken, but it requires local community support, local community involvement. So there is a lot more to do for India to deal with the impact, given the consequences, given the impact. And in the coming decades, we will witness more such incidents, more frequent, more intense forest fires. So though we have an action plan, we have a scheme as well, it requires more funding. States need more support, better early warning and forecasting with better technology and involvement of local community. So that is what we need to tackle forest fires. So that's what we understand from this important article. So please take up this mains practice question, use it for your answer writing practice. Now let's look at another interesting column that we have today on page number 7 that deals with cybersecurity. The state of Karnataka has recently witnessed few deadly cyber attacks, which has exposed the vulnerabilities of Karnataka's cyber infrastructure and critical information infrastructure. So this is what we are going to learn in this article. So let's take a quick look. The Karnataka government has developed a IT tool called the Kaveri portal, Kaveri 2.0, for property registration. Right, in the state of Karnataka, for property registration, there is a government portal called Kaveri, which has been quite phenomenal. It has increased revenue collection for the government, reduced corruption and brought transparency as well. This critical property registration portal was recently targeted by malicious cyber threat actors with a deadly DDoS attack. Using AI bots, artificial intelligence bots, a distributed denial of service attack was launched, which basically disabled the service of the Kaveri portal, resulting in significant loss of revenue for the Revenue Department of Karnataka. This also threatens the sanctity of the data, the sensitive personal data which might be stored in these critical computer systems. And this is not just one lone incident. Karnataka has repeatedly witnessed such breaches in cybersecurity. Few years ago, I still remember in 2017, the Karnataka State Data Center, which is again managed by the e-governance department of the government of Karnataka, came under a major ransomware attack, the WannaCry ransomware attack. It led to the crippling of critical data stored in these critical government systems. The e-Khata filing system in Karnataka again was recently targeted with various malwares. So we have seen such repeated incidents happening in the state of Karnataka. Now this is quite ironic because Bangalore, the capital, Bengaluru, and the state of Karnataka are seen as the IT hubs of the nation, not just the nation, the entire world. And the government of Karnataka has not focused enough on cybersecurity, especially in protecting its critical information infrastructure. There is a clear lapse and failure on the part of the government of Karnataka. So this is what the writer and the article here, they are exploring these key topics. So you need to know what is DDoS attack, what's a ransomware attack, what is critical information infrastructure, what measures are being undertaken by the government, what else can be done to improve cybersecurity. That's what we need to learn both for prelims and mains. So let's start with DDoS. What is distributed denial of service attack? As the name itself tells you, it's an attempt to deny service. Now see, there might be several legitimate users who are trying to access a certain online service. Now, if there is an attack designed to disrupt this delivery of online service so that legitimate users cannot access the online service, that is a distributed denial of service attack, where the genuine service which should be available for genuine users and customers is being denied because of a distributed attack which is being mounted on the targeted server. To understand this better, we can take an example. Now, for example, let's say UPSC Prelims application has been opened up, right? Lakhs of aspirants from across country are applying through the UPSC OTR portal. Now, UPSC would have anticipated a certain amount of traffic. Accordingly, it would have designed its server and systems and capabilities to handle that bandwidth of traffic. Let's say UPSC servers can handle a million simultaneous requests, and just for safety purposes, an additional buffer would also be created just to handle any sudden surge in traffic, because many times aspirants apply at the last minute, or let's say results are out and there's a sudden surge in traffic on the UPSC website. To accommodate for these surge in traffic, there is an additional buffer which is added to ensure that service is always maintained and the server doesn't go down. But what if there are threat actors, malicious cyber threat actors who identify the capacity of a server, they try to breach that capacity. Let's say UPSC server can handle only 2 million requests simultaneously. What if they mount repeated requests? Let's say 4-5 million requests. Now the UPSC server will not know which request to serve. Eventually the server is going to shut down, right? This essentially is denial of service. So these illegitimate requests can come in. These illegitimate requests can come in through the bots that are designed by the cyber threat actors. Now, those who want to target a particular online service or a particular server, right, they might get control of maybe hundreds and millions of computers around the world through various malwares and use this to replicate legitimate traffic to overwhelm the capacity of that server, so that the server doesn't know which request to serve, and eventually server is going to crash, and even legitimate, legal, genuine users will not be able to access the service. The website goes down. Since the fake requests, the illegitimate requests are coming from different systems, different bot computers around the world, it's a distributed attack. It's a decentralized attack. You don't need hundreds and lakhs of computers as well. Today, AI algorithms can be designed to create bots, AI bots, which can ping these fake requests, bounce its location and IP address using proxy servers, and appear as if it's legitimate traffic coming from around the world, while it's actually fake traffic created by cyber threat actors who are targeting the server. So the attempt in DDoS attack is to overwhelm the capacity of the server with fake requests so that the server will crash, thus denying service to the legitimate users and customers. So when the Kaveri portal was targeted with a DDoS attack just last week, right, property registration came to a complete halt. In fact, throughout January, February, we saw this disruption. And as a result, it has resulted in massive loss of revenue for the government of Karnataka. Property registrations have been delayed. And when servers go down, their basic firewall also will be down for a few seconds or minutes, which creates an opportunity for the threat actors to breach into the server and steal sensitive data as well. So government of Karnataka has been highly vulnerable because critical infrastructure of the government is being repeatedly subjected to such attacks. Now, if you look at the ransomware attack that happened in 2017, the WannaCry ransomware incident, a ransomware is designed to lock up a key computer, encrypt the data which is stored with high-level encryption, and blackmail the victim to extract a ransom from them. Unless and until the ransom is paid, usually in bitcoins or cryptocurrencies, the de-encryption key is not provided. And if the victim tries to break into the system on their own, it is going to erase all the data, especially when sensitive data is stored. Nobody can afford to lose the data, so the victims end up paying the ransom, especially when government organizations, private companies are targeted. They can't afford to lose sensitive data just because the system has been locked up. The malware is designed to lock up all the data and encrypt the system so that the user cannot access the system anymore. The only way they can access is by paying the ransom to the attackers through crypto coins and bitcoins. So ransomware attacks have become the biggest threat, and Karnataka government platforms have repeatedly come under such ransomware attacks. So there have been many such incidents which have happened. Now this is where you need to understand the concept of critical infrastructure and critical information infrastructure. Now when we say critical infrastructure, it refers to the key infrastructure of the state, the public infrastructure. It could be key government buildings and offices, key defense and security installations. It also includes airports, seaports, then power infrastructure, the power grids, the power transmission lines, the critical dams in the country, then all the nuclear power plants, thermal power plants in the country, then even the railway infrastructure, the banking system, the entire financial markets, including the stock markets, the mobile and internet infrastructure. So all of this, the physical infrastructure, falls under the bracket of critical infrastructure. Now this is what we refer to as the critical infrastructure of a country. Be it key government facilities, defense and security installations, the banking and financial institutions, right? Then mobile internet facilities, power infrastructure, airports, seaports, power grids, the dams and power plants, they all constitute the critical infrastructure of a country. These public infrastructure projects are interlinked. The country's economy, security is dependent on it. So if someone were to attack the critical infrastructure of a nation, it can cripple the country, bring down the economy and the security of that nation. So it's very crucial to protect the critical infrastructure of a country. Now, these critical infrastructure projects, they will be linked with IT systems. They will be managed with computers that might be linked to the internet as well. For example, operations in an airport is managed through computers, port operations, railway operations, banking, financial markets, mobile internet systems and switching equipment is all digital today. Even the operation of dams, power plants, government facilities, military communication, etc. is all entirely digital, linked with computers and IT infrastructure. So this digital infrastructure, which is the backbone of the critical infrastructure, is referred to as critical information infrastructure of a country, CII. So it's very crucial to protect the computer systems, the networks, right? The digital systems which back up your critical infrastructure. So in cybersecurity, it's very crucial to protect and defend your critical information infrastructure. But the irony with regard to Karnataka is, though it is the IT hub, the government hasn't taken adequate measures to deal with these threats. Such threats have been coming repeatedly. And what is even more concerning is that in the recent incident which happened, where a DDoS attack was reported on the Kaveri property registration portal, the e-governance department, which handles the portal, did not even register a police complaint with the cyber police of the Karnataka police. They did not even bring in the cyber police until the last minute. They tried to cover up the incident. They tried to manage the incident on their own, though they have no expertise to do that. And they did not bring in the technical professionals, experts and cybersecurity professionals. And they didn't even register a complaint with the cyber police until the last minute. Now, this is a major breach of protocol as well. It shows that at the state level, adequate structures, institutions and protocols have not been created. So that is what is concerning here. Now, if you look at the national level, right, we have many institutions created for this purpose with standard protocols. See, Karnataka government has a Karnataka state cyber security policy that was adopted a few years ago. According to Karnataka state cyber security policy, there is a cyber security committee which is headed by the chief secretary of the state. But this cyber security committee is entirely comprised of government officials. that is bureaucrats, and it has no representation for technical experts and security officials. Karnataka police are not even involved in the cyber security committee. Those with technical expertise are not brought into the cyber security committee. It is entirely dominated by government bureaucrats who have little knowledge or experience of dealing with such cyber threats, which can be of a global nature. So this is where Karnataka should learn from the national model, because if you look at the national model for cybersecurity, we have multiple institutions with set jurisdictions, set protocols. We have CERT in Computer Emergency Response Team India that functions under Ministry of Electronics and IT, which works as the nodal agency, a civilian agency to deal with all cyber threats, to protect and defend India's cyberspace, be it cyber crimes, emerging malwares and cyber threats. CERT in is the nodal agency responsible for that. It maintains a 24/7 operation center that functions round the clock looking out for threats to protect and defend the Indian cyberspace. Then under CERT in, there is a platform called NCCC, National Cyber Coordination Center, so that CERT in can coordinate with other stakeholders in case of a major cyber incident. Because sometimes there might be a national security risk. So CERT in will have to coordinate with the armed forces, intelligence agencies, or the private sector as well, which provides for the internet and mobile infrastructure through which cyber attacks can be mounted. So to achieve such coordination with different stakeholders, under CERT in there is a platform, a coordination platform called NCCC, which was provided under the National Cyber Security Policy of 2013. The same policy established the NCIIPC, National Critical Information Infrastructure Protection Center. A dedicated cybersecurity agency has been set up to protect the critical information infrastructure of the country, the NCIIPC, which functions under NTRO, the Premier Technical Intelligence Agency of India. So under the National Technical Research Organization, the NCIIPC acts as the National Critical Information Infrastructure Protection Center, defending and protecting our critical information infrastructure against cyber attacks. Then under Home Ministry, we have I4C, the Indian Cybercrime Coordination Center. Since MHA is the nodal ministry to deal with cyber crimes, and since it has to coordinate with state governments as well to tackle cyber crimes, it has set up I4C, Indian Cybercrime Coordination Center, which is very proactive in working with state governments to tackle different types of cyber crimes. So such arrangements are necessary at the level of the state government as well. Karnataka requires a 24/7 cyber operation center which can deal with these threats in real time, deflect them and defend the critical information infrastructure. So some states such as Kerala, Maharashtra and Odisha, they have done much better in this regard. The state governments have involved the police and security officials. They have set up dedicated monitoring agencies and operation centers to deal with cyber crimes and cyber threats emerging in real time and to tackle them, defend the critical information infrastructure of the state. Kerala, for example, had set up Cyber Dome as a cyber security research facility to help Kerala police tackle cyber crimes and cyber threats. So such lessons can be drawn from Karnataka, from Kerala, Maharashtra and Odisha to be implemented in other states like Karnataka. That is what we take away from this important update. Next, on page 6 and 14, we have a couple of articles related to what's happening in our neighboring country, in Bangladesh. There are some very serious concerning developments. See, last year in August 2024, the pro-India leader Sheikh Hasina was thrown out of power by the anti-government protesters, and Sheikh Hasina took refuge in India. She was exiled into India. Since then, Bangladesh has come under the rule of an interim government, which is backed by the Bangladeshi military. And Muhammad Yunus, the Nobel laureate and a controversial figure as well, has become the interim ruler of this interim government backed by the Bangladeshi military. So in the last 6 months, now it's been 6 months since this crisis, when Sheikh Hasina and her party Awami League, which has been a pro-India party, was removed from power. Since then, we have seen the descent of Bangladesh into chaos. Large-scale violence has broken out, especially targeted violence against Awami League members, leaders of Awami League, and as well as against religious minorities. And this is a matter of deep concern for India. In the last 6 months, we have seen radical mobs linked with radical organizations such as the Jamaat-e-Islami and other pro-Pakistan, pro-Al-Qaeda, pro-Islamic State groups, which have repeatedly carried out attacks against religious minorities and ethnic minorities. For example, in Bangladesh, the Hindu community, Bengali Hindu community, has been very prone to these attacks. Even Christians have been targeted. Places of worship, such as temples, churches, have been repeatedly targeted. Even Muslims, such as Ahmadiyas, even they have been targeted. So different sects of Islam as well, they have faced such communal violence, targeted communal sectarian violence. Different ethnic linguistic groups in the Chittagong region, in the Chittagong Hill Tract, where you find few ethnic indigenous communities, they have also been targeted by the radical majoritarian mobs, which are linked with radical forces and terrorist forces. Now, we have seen something unprecedented happen under the watch of the interim government itself. Just few days ago, the residence and the memorial of the founding father of Bangladesh, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, the father of Sheikh Hasina as well, the house and property has been destroyed by these radical mobs. Sheikh Mujibur Rahman played the pivotal role in the liberation of Bangladesh. India, under Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, gave complete support to Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, and he emerged as the founding father of the country, as the first president of Bangladesh as well. So, the house and property, the residence belonging to Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, where he and his family were assassinated, has been destroyed by these mobs. There have been targeted attacks against Awami League leaders. Those Awami League leaders and cadres who are still present, they are being targeted by these radical forces and political forces, and there is no hope of any election taking place. The task of the interim government was to stabilize the country, to put an end to these incidents, to protect religious minorities and political opposition, and to pave the way for democratic elections, so that parties like BNP, Bangladesh Nationalist Party, Awami League and others could contest elections and people could elect the future government. But as of now, there has been no progress in this regard, and these developments are a matter of big concern for India. These attacks, these mob incidents are taking place under the watch of the security forces. Bangladeshi police, army and military, they are standing by when these attacks are being carried out. Imagine the house and memorial of the father of the nation being torn down and burnt right in front of Bangladeshi security forces, who are not even taking a single step to prevent these mobs. They managed to bring JCBs and large equipment to destroy these critical buildings, set them on fire. Awami League leaders are being hunted, and security forces have even launched a deadly operation which they have codenamed as Operation Devil Hunt. Operation Devil Hunt is this controversial security operation launched by Bangladeshi security forces, under which they are targeting political opposition, particularly Awami League leaders, by blaming them for violence and atrocities under the Sheikh Hasina regime. Now, this in a way has brought back the horrific memories of Operation Searchlight in 1971 that then Pakistani army had unleashed against the Bengali liberation fighters. The then Bengali liberation movement was crushed through brutal atrocities committed by Pakistani army under Operation Searchlight. Now, Bangladeshi forces have launched somewhat a similar operation called Operation Devil Hunt. Just look at the name of it. And they are mainly targeting leaders of Awami League. They are targeting the leaders and cadres and officials of the previous regime, right? Those who are members of the Awami League. And they are calling it Operation Devil Hunt, equating the political opposition with devils. This targeted attack against the political opposition, continuing attacks against religious minorities, is a matter of deep concern for India. So that is what the editorial is trying to highlight here. So India, which is closely watching these developments, will have to take immediate steps. It has to bring pressure on Bangladesh, the interim government, on Mohammad Yunus, to control these incidents of violence, control these radical mobs, and protect religious minorities and political opposition, and rein in the security forces which appear to be targeting the political opposition. Once things stabilize, there is a need to bring immediate reforms, political, economic reforms, and pave the way for elections so that democratic governments can be elected. So let's see, let's wait and watch what happens in Bangladesh. Then coming to another important development, Prime Minister Modi is visiting France for 3 days to attend a very, very important summit, the AI Action Summit, which is being hosted by France with India as the co-chair of the AI Action Summit. French President Emmanuel Macron has invited India to be the co-chair of the AI Action Summit to decide the governance structure, the regulation of AI technologies, and to deal with all the risks, the safety risks associated with AI technologies. See, this initiative started back in 2023 in United Kingdom when UK hosted the first AI Safety Summit. This was the first ever international summit on artificial intelligence. It was held at the historic Bletchley Park. The Bletchley Park is a very historic site. At the historic Bletchley Park, this is where British mathematicians like Alan Turing, they broke the encryption of the Nazis. The Enigma code was broken during the World War. So at this site at Bletchley Park, UK held the first ever AI Safety Summit in 2023 and countries adopted the Bletchley Declaration. Under Bletchley Declaration, which was signed by India as well, India was a participant and a signatory to it. These countries committed to promote the safety of AI technologies, to ensure that AI tools are not misused to threaten human rights, to threaten our security, our civilization, to prevent harmful AI technologies from being ever developed and deployed. So this was a landmark development when the Bletchley Declaration was adopted in 2023. Last year, this was followed up with the AI Seoul Summit in South Korea. In the South Korean city of Seoul, the second AI Summit was held, where countries discussed about regulation of AI, governance of AI technologies. Now France and India are hosting and co-chairing the AI Action Summit, and PM Modi has addressed the gathering and the world leaders, speaking about the role of AI, where does India stand, what are the risks that we foresee, and how can we govern and regulate AI. So PM Modi has stated that AI technologies, they may not take away the jobs as we all have envisioned, because PM Modi has brought a good illustration here. He has said technology has never really taken away jobs, it has created more jobs. Now, just because nuclear technology came out, computers, internet came out, right? Even then there was a fear, especially when computers and internet came out, that many jobs would be lost. But eventually it ended up creating more number of jobs. With AI as well, if governments focus on upskilling, reskilling, and create the right talent force, there will be many opportunities that will open up, which has been correctly pointed out by the Prime Minister. But PM Modi has also pointed out the risks, the safety risks, security risks associated with AI, the need for better global governance of harmful AI technologies and its harmful applications. Eventually, a statement was adopted by the countries that were participating, and only 57 countries, and according to latest report, almost 60 countries have signed the joint statement. But major powers like US and UK have not signed the joint statement. US was represented by the Vice President, Mr. Vance, and he strongly spoke about excessive regulation. He said if the world tries to over-regulate AI, it can stifle the emerging industry and cripple innovation and development. And he has said that US will never support unnecessary excessive regulation, despite the risks associated with it. So the US and UK, right, they have not signed the joint statement until now, but 57 countries, and according to latest reports, almost 60 countries, including India, have signed the joint statement. Now, PM Modi raised one very, very important concern about accessibility. As AI technologies evolve and new landmark tools are being developed, generative AI tools like ChatGPT, DeepSeek, etc., many countries are falling behind. Countries like US, China, developed countries are taking the lead. So as always, they will have better access to these technologies, which will bring about big transformations in their economies. but many countries will be left behind. It is going to create a new kind of divide, a new kind of inequality. So India has stressed upon the need for equitable access, inclusive access, keeping in mind the needs of the global south. So again, you see the leadership of India with regard to South-South cooperation. PM Modi has used the platform to raise the need for accessibility to AI tools, resources and technologies. So even poor countries, developing, underdeveloped countries can access them, benefit from the positive applications of AI. India has raised a valid point, that AI tools and resources should not be limited to the rich and developed nations. It should be made accessible. It should be more inclusive. It should be made available to all the countries. So that is something that we need to note down with regard to this development. Now we head towards the last part of today's discussion, just a few small articles, and we'll wrap up the session for today. On the front page itself, we have a polity related article regarding the situation in Manipur. After nearly 1.5 to 2 years of ethnic violence, the CM of Manipur, former CM Biren Singh, took responsibility and resigned, stepped down, and now Manipur's government is in crisis. The ruling BJP is waiting and watching to see any new leaders emerging to stake claim, and as of now, no new chief minister has been appointed, and there is also intense speculation that the centre might bring in president's rule. Under the provisions of Article 356, an emergency provision, and suspend the state assembly. So this could bring Manipur under the centre's rule with the imposition of president's rule under Article 356. But however, the article is referring to one situation which has developed in Manipur right now. See, Manipur State Assembly, the legislative assembly, the elected legislative assembly, has not met in the last 6 months. Today marks the 6-month deadline which has been given in our constitution. If you have gone through Indian constitution, under Article 174, clause 1, it is clearly stated that legislative assemblies have to meet within 6 months. The maximum gap, maximum duration between the last session of the previous sitting and the next session, the first sitting of the next session, should not be more than 6 months. A similar clause exists for the parliament as well, that every 6 months there has to be a session of the legislature. So this is a constitutional mandate. The gap cannot be more than 6 months between the last sitting of the previous session and the first sitting of the next upcoming session. Now in Manipur, this unique situation has developed where it has been more than 6 months since the last assembly session. So what happens next is the question. Can this be a ground to suspend the elected assembly and bring president's rule under Article 356? That is the legal constitutional question which comes up. Does this represent a breakdown of constitutional machinery? Since this constitutional provision of Article 174 has been breached, no assembly session has been held in 6 months, can this be a ground to suspend the assembly itself based on the report of the governor? And can this be a ground to bring in president's rule under Article 356? So this is where we have a Supreme Court judgment for reference. Back in 2002 in Gujarat, while dealing with a similar case in the Bharat Bhai Bhagwanji Bhai case versus state of Gujarat, the Supreme Court had passed an opinion that just because the mandate of Article 174 has not been met, just because state assembly has not been convened within 6 months, that cannot be a ground, that alone cannot be a ground for bringing president's rule under Article 356 to suspend an elected assembly. Of course, there are other provisions on which president's rule can be brought in when there is a complete failure of constitutional machinery based on the report of the governor. Article 356 can be invoked. But Supreme Court was very clear in 2002 in the Bharat Bhai Bhagwanji Bhai case in Gujarat that just because state assembly has not met in 6 months and it is in violation of Article 174, that alone cannot be a ground to invoke 356 and bring president's rule. So that is something you need to know. This interpretation of the Supreme Court of Article 174 and 356, the interconnection between them, is something you need to note down. Next, IIT Madras has developed an indigenous semiconductor chip known as Shakti, which is a big breakthrough for India in the semiconductor domain. Researchers at IIT Madras, in collaboration with ISRO, have developed this advanced semiconductor chip that promotes indigenization of semiconductor design and fabrication in India. This initiative to develop Shakti semiconductor chip is pioneered by Ministry of Electronics and IT, supported and sponsored under the Digital India Risk 5 initiative. So this semiconductor chip has been specifically developed to meet the needs of ISRO. ISRO needs an indigenous advanced chip for its space applications. This chip can be used for IoT technologies as well, Internet of Things, and for aerospace domain. So specifically, ISRO is looking for semiconductor chips which are reliable, safe and secure for upcoming space missions. And to fulfill this requirement, IIT Madras has developed this indigenous semiconductor chip in collaboration with ISRO. So this is a big scientific breakthrough for India, the development of an indigenous semiconductor chip, specifically to fulfill strategic needs of the space sector. So please make a note of this. Now coming to the last article on page 14, we have another fresh update from Democratic Republic of Congo. See, in one of the recent sessions, we spoke about the civil war in DRC, which is led by a rebel group known as M23 rebels, who are allegedly sponsored by the neighboring country of Rwanda. So M23 rebels have captured the entire northeastern part of DRC. The Goma, North Kivu province has come under their control. Large-scale fighting and violence has broken out. Now, in the northeastern part, there has been another fresh wave of violence which has begun by another militant group called CODECO. CODECO is another militant group based out of Democratic Republic of Congo, representing the Lendu ethno-linguistic community. CODECO was actually an agricultural cooperative organization once upon a time. Its name actually stood for Cooperative for Development of Congo. It was a cooperative society of the pastoralist farmers belonging to the Lendu community. The Lendu is an ethno-linguistic pastoralist group that you find in northeastern part of Democratic Republic of Congo, especially in the Ituri province and the North Kivu province. This is where you find the Lendu community, the pastoralist agricultural community. So they had formed a cooperative organization many years ago to focus on development and agricultural cooperation. But as the country descended into civil war and chaos, as Lendu community was subjected to attacks because of a few Islamist terrorist organizations and rebel groups like M23, the Lendu community, which primarily follows Christianity and a cult of Christianity, has brought a mix of religion and radicalism to form its own militant organization called CODECO. This cooperative outfit became a militant organization and it is responsible for many attacks in the region. It has carried out many massacres, and it's been reported that just yesterday, more than 55 civilians have been massacred by this militant group called CODECO in northeastern Congo. So these are developments that you should track. You should know the places where it's happening, the important actors who are involved. I think that's very important for your prelims exam. So on this note, I bring my discussion to an end. I hope it's been a useful, interesting session. I hope you have understood all the key topics. And if you did benefit from the session, do support us with your likes and comments. That is what keeps us motivated. So that is it for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. Take care. Have a good day.